Good morning. Everybody's doing okay today? I want to welcome our visitors with us today. We have you feel welcome here at the community. We got Wednesday night Bible study at 6:30. We're still collecting recipes for our church cookbook. Please, you can send an email to Miss Jackie, and her email address is in the bulletin, or drop it in the box in the foyer. This Thursday night is our youth fishing rodeo at 6 p.m. and the rodeo is Saturday, July 11th. What time are we starting that deal?
8 o'clock. It's going to be 8 to 10.
8 to 10.
And we're going to feed them hot dogs after the rodeo.
Eating hot dogs afterwards, and be at Vista Farm. And I think there's going to be a lot of fish caught. If you want to keep them, keep them. And if not, I think Steve Bailey's going to try to keep them and put them in his pond. Birthdays for the week: July the 7th is Caden McGee, Miss Barbara Roberts. July 9th, Hunter Sexton. July the 11th, Skylar Reed. Anniversaries: July 10th, Blake and Bonnie Williams. We got anything else? Hey, DR, y'all gonna put the words up here? We're gonna do something a little bit different this morning before we get started, since yesterday was celebrating Independence Day. We're gonna say the pledge to the Christian flag and the American flag. Y'all will stand up. We'll start with the Christian flag. I pledge
allegiance to the Christian flag and to the Savior for whose kingdom it stands, one brotherhood, uniting all mankind, in service and love. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Brother Ricky, would you lead us in a word this morning before we get started?
Father, we thank God for being with us today in this God's house, that we might worship you. We just praise you, God, for who you are, and thank you, God, for the blessings of life that you've given us. Thank you for the freedom that we have in this country, God. I just pray that you would continue to have it. Pray, God, that you would continue to bless our nation. I pray, Father, that you would be with Christian people, that they would take a stand for you, God, and stand up and be counted. And that, God, that you would lead us and guide us in doing the things, God, that you would have us to be doing. Father, I just praise you for what you are doing today. I just ask, God, if there's one here this morning that doesn't know you this morning, that God, that big day that they would turn to you and trust in you and put their faith in you. Do Brother Will today as he brings a message to us, give him the words you have us to hear. In Jesus' name I pray. Good morning. We're going to do patriotic songs this morning. America the Beautiful. America the Beautiful. I think it's going to be on the... Yeah, there it is. Let's stand together. Let's stand together. Oh, beautiful, for spacious lands, forever waves of grain, for purple mountains, majesties, above the fruited plain. America, America, God shed His grace
God shed His grace on me, and crown my good with brotherhood, from sea to shining sea.
God bless America. God bless America.
God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with the light from above. From the mountains to the prairies to the oceans white with foam. God bless America, my home, sweet home. God bless America, my home, sweet home.
You may be seated.
We've got some babies to dedicate this morning. All our babies and parents will step forward. Yeah, everybody, come on down. Anybody gets out of hand, we got law enforcement here. We call this baby dedication, but really what we're talking about is parent dedication. This is the parents coming before the church, asking you to hope that they would be the kind of parents that God has called them to be. And the job as a parent is so hard, but at the same time, God made it very simple. Mark chapter 10, verse 13 says, "And they were bringing children to him so that he might touch them, but the disciples rebuked them. But when Jesus saw this, he was indignant and said to them, 'Permit the children to come to me, do not hinder them.'" And you know what? That, in a nutshell, is the job of a parent. To take these little souls that God has given to us and to give them right back to God where they belong. So, for you to remember your commitment today, we have a couple of little Bibles and a certificate. Mr. Elijah Lynn Smith. Ms. Hayden Diller. And last but certainly not least, Elizabeth. Now y'all look at the eyes on that. Let's have a prayer for them. Father, thank you so much for these parents. Lord, I thank you for the dedication that they have to you. Father, I thank you for the commitment that they're making, that they would give these little souls right back to you, to place them right into the lap of Jesus. And Father, as a church family, Lord, help us to encourage them, to be there for them. And Lord, as we enter into this worship service, God, I just pray that you get glory for your Son, Jesus. In Christ's name we pray. Amen. Y'all give them a hand. All right, kiddos. All right, I want to ask you if you'll take your Bible with me to the book of Philemon. Philemon. And whoever makes it to Philemon chapter 2 first, raise your hand.
You raise your hand.
Book of Philemon. Just real quick, we're going to look at Philemon in verse 15. Miss Laura got there first. Philemon verse 15. When you get it, say got it. Paul says to Mr. Philemon, for perhaps he was for this reason separated from you for a while, that you would have him back forever, no longer as a slave, but as much more than a slave, a beloved brother, especially to me, but how much more to you, both in the flesh and in the Lord. So, I'm going to be talking about something today that I think a lot of people would rather me not talk about. Many would say that what I'm going to talk about today is very divisive. That Will, you're creating division. Luke 12:51, Jesus says, "Do you suppose that I came to grant peace on earth?" In other words, do you think that I came to bring harmony? Do you think I came to make everybody, happy and everybody unified? He says, no, I tell you, I came to bring division. Why did Jesus bring division? Jesus brought division because he couldn't help not to, because Jesus declared himself to be the truth, and truth always, without fail, divides. Because truth draws a very distinct line in the sand, and it demands that you pick a side. Will you be in the truth, or will you be outside of the truth? Some of the things that you're going to hear today, you may hear some of these things and say, well, that's not very appropriate, or that's not very politically correct, or that hurts my feelings, or I find that offensive. Well, your question should not be, how do these things make me feel? Your question should be, are these things true? Right? Are these things true? Now, if the things I say are not true, then I'm open for criticism. But if they are true, then the truth is the truth. We are all aware of what is called the Black Lives Matter movement. And I want to make myself very clear right out of the gate. I have always made it a personal priority of my own that I would never use God's pulpit for political purposes. I never have done that, and I don't intend to do it now. But here's the thing. The Black Lives Matter movement has so saturated the media, the political media, that it would be easy for you to hear some of these things that I'm saying and say, oh, well, Brother Will's being political. I'm not being political. Because at the heart of this issue and what we're talking about, it is a moral issue. What we are dealing with is absolutely a moral issue. And since it's a moral issue, not only do I have the right to address it, I have the responsibility to address it. Now, what we're being told by the media is that the majority of white people have a serious problem with racism against black people. And they say that the proof of this racism that white people have against black people is police brutality against black people. And as if I even need to say this, I've said it many times, and I'll go ahead and say it again. And I know we all agree about this. What happened to Mr. George Floyd is absolutely inexcusable. Do we agree with that? That's murder. It's not okay. But here's the question. Does that incident of police brutality prove that there is a widespread, pervasive, systematic problem with racism? Does it prove that? I want to read you some numbers that you will not hear on the news. All right? And before I give you these numbers, let me say this. These numbers do not convey or reveal how many of these killings were justified and how many of them were not. Let me also say that the media is not telling you about the fact that our law enforcement step into situations that they don't know what to expect. And they've already been having to operate with one arm tied behind their back. Now our society wants to tie both arms behind their back, yet still tell them to put themselves in danger. But here's the numbers. In 2019, 605 Americans were killed by the police. Now, do you think more black Americans were killed by the police, or do you think more white Americans were killed by the police? It turns out 235 were black, 370 were white. All right? So far in this year, 2020, 309 Americans have been killed by the police. 105 were black, 204 were white. So essentially, twice the amount of white people are being killed by the police than are black people. Now let's talk about situations where you have a civilian that is killed by the police, but he's unarmed. And I'll tell you something else about these numbers in this one. It doesn't tell us the circumstance in which these unarmed civilians were shot. So here's the way I look at it. If you have a BB gun that looks like a pistol and you point it at a police officer, what do you expect? Do we agree? He's got a wife and kids to go home to. So with that being said, last year 114 unarmed civilians were killed by the police. 28 were black, 48 were white. The rest are categorized as either as Hispanic and other. So again, twice, double the amount of white unarmed civilians were killed last year than were black unarmed civilians. So number one, let me ask you this question. Since there were twice as many white unarmed civilians killed than were black unarmed civilians, can you tell me the name of one single white unarmed civilian that was killed last year? You can't tell me a single name. And I can't tell you a single name. But twice more, double the amount was killed, so why don't we know any of their names? That's number one. Second of all, since there were almost twice the amount of unarmed whites killed, why is it the narrative then that there is police brutality and racism against whites? Now here's all I'm trying to say. Maybe, just maybe, you're not being told the truth. Maybe there is a dangerous agenda that is wanting to turn our nation upside down, but this dangerous agenda is hiding behind the bushes of certain virtue signaling things, such as this title of Black Lives Matter. Now, while we're here, are there some bad policemen? Yep, there's some bad policemen. I think there's policemen that let the authority go to their head. They let the authority go to their head. But you know what? There's bad doctors too. There's bad pharmacists. There's bad lawyers. There's bad carpenters. That's life. And I think by and large, you know, they sign up to be policemen because they make so much money, right? No. I think the majority of these guys, they just want to do the job. And here's something that our society has totally forgotten. The Bible says, be subject to the powers that be because they are ordained by God. So here's what that means. Government authority comes from who? It comes from God. God established in every society government authorities. That includes law enforcement. And God tells the civilians in every society to do right, obey the law of the land for this reason. He says this, they do not bear the sword in vain. So what does that mean? Well, what's a sword for? Use a sword to spank people? Let's be more specific, like modern day terms with policemen who carry a firearm. A sword, do you use a sword to pepper spray people? Do you use a sword to tase people? No. A sword is given by God to government authorities, law enforcement authorities, so that they can use lethal force to stop in their tracks anybody who wants to be a violent aggressor and endanger innocent life. That's what it's for. And so God says you respect those authorities and you honor those authorities because here's why. Evil in our society is not as bad as it could be. Because God has placed in our society and every other society certain restraining forces. One of them is the church. Our nation is not as bad as it would be if it were not for the church. The influence of the church helps limit the spread of evil. Another thing God put in society is He put in every one of us this thing called the conscience. So if you do things that are bad, you have this guilt mechanism. That's another restraint against evil. But you know what another restraint against evil is? Law enforcement. Everybody's talking about let's defund the police. Well, good luck with that. You know, police The police have already been villainized to the point that you're already cutting down on the amount of people that would ever even want to be the policeman. Now you're talking about discouraging them even more by defunding them. So go ahead and cut down that line of defense and see how fast evil spikes. And already seeing some of that. Now let's talk for a minute about racism. Y'all ready for this? Seems like nobody else has the guts to say it, so I'm going to say it. There is a race of people in our society who has done catastrophic damage to American culture. There is a race of people who, because of their violent intentions, we can't even feel safe in our homes anymore. And I don't want to be misunderstood. I'm not saying that all of them are bad. There are some good ones in this race of people. Like, I don't have a problem with the ones who have red hair and brown eyes. I don't have a problem with them. I don't have a problem with the ones who have red hair and blue eyes. I don't even have a problem with the ones that's got red hair and green eyes. But there are some bad ones among the red hair race of people. And we know who it is. The ones with red hair and yellow eyes, they are very bad news. Did we get the picture? All right. How many of you ever seen the Christmas Story movie? Okay. Now, a lot of people think that the Christmas Story movie is all about this kid named Ralphie and his journey in acquiring a Red Ryder BB gun with a compass in the stock. Y'all gotta understand that's a cover-up story. What that movie is really about is warning us about the Scott Farkases of the world. That's his name, Scott Farkas. The red-head, yellow-eyed, mean bully. Him and his crummy little toady, Grover Gill, constantly bully Ralphie and Swartz and Flick, making fun of them, stealing their lunch money, bending their arm until they say uncle, just mean. And the whole movie is just warning our society that people with red hair and yellow eyes are bad news. So if you own a business and one of them comes to you wanting a job, don't hire them. All right? If you got a little kid and he's like, hey, I made a friend at school. He's got red hair and yellow eyes. You shut that down. Do not let them befriend them. Or, a guy shows up at your house and he's got red hair and yellow eyes. Call the cops. They're all bad news. Stay away from all of the Scott Farkases of the world. Now, here's the point I'm making. If someone told you, you know what, I just cannot stand people with red hair and yellow eyes. I can't stand them. Which ones? All of them. Or if somebody said, you know what, all men who are 6'4" and taller are just pure evil. Or if somebody said, listen, people with large foreheads, you can't trust any of them. If anybody came to you with those kinds of prejudices, you would say, you're so ignorant. Why? Because the color of your hair and the height of your stature and the size of your forehead has absolutely nothing to do with what kind of person you are. And you say, well, duh, okay, it's the same thing when it comes to the color of a person's skin. Just like the color of your hair has nothing to do with your character, so also the color, whether it's your hair or your skin or whatever, it has no bearing on what kind of person you are. And so that is why racism is not only fueled by hatred. Y'all hate to say it, it's also fueled by stupidity. It is a truly stupid and ignorant thing to judge someone based off of their skin tone. Because guess what? Your skin tone has absolutely nothing to do with what's in here, right? Has nothing to do with what's right here. So, racism's bad. Racism is ignorance at its zenith. Now, is there racism today? Yeah. Always has been. My best friend growing up in school was not a white guy. And when I say we were best friends, I mean we were best friends. I went to his house all the time. He came to my house all the time. And I'll tell you something that our friendship taught me. Something I still look back on and find very interesting. I never saw mine and his friendship as being abnormal. To me, two white guys being best buds was no different than a black guy and a white guy being best buds. I saw no difference, and I don't think he did either. Here's what's sad. It took adults, it took grown-ups for me to see that, hey, this is not really normal that a black guy and a white guy are like best friends. So I had this two-seater go-kart, that my neighbor down the road had this big field beside his house, and he would let me ride my go-kart in this field along the edges of it. And one day, this best friend of mine came over to the house, and so I took him riding on my go-kart, and I went into this field and had a good time. Well, the next day I get the message that I'm not to step foot back on his property if I'm going to have blacks with me. I never told my friend about that. I never told him about that family member of mine who took issue with me having a black guy as my best friend. I never talked to my friend about any of that. But I also think about the fact that, I went to his house too. He lived in a black neighborhood right outside the projects, and his family and his friends saw us out riding their bikes and shooting basketball and shooting paintball and ding-dong ditching. Don't act like you had never done that, And I wonder if he got criticism because he, as a black guy, had a white guy as his best friend. They have to deal with that too. You ever heard the phrase Uncle Tom? That's where that comes from. If you're a black person and you have a best white friend, or you have a lot of white friends, or you work with a lot of white people, or heaven forbid you go to a white church, you'll get labeled Uncle Tom. So I don't know if he ever faced any of that. I would assume he did because I did. But I never talked to him about it, and he never talked to me about it, and we stayed best friends from elementary school throughout high school, and we stay in touch today. So is there racism? There is absolutely racism. But here's the question. Is racism as pervasive and systematic a problem as they're telling us it is? Let me ask you this. Do you think America is more racist today than it was 10 years ago? Do you think America is more racist today than it was in 1990 or 1960? Somehow America became more racist now than it was ever since the days of Martin Luther King. Is that the case? No, it's not. And you know what? That is an absolute disrespect to all the civil rights leaders, black and white, who made such sacrifices to help get us to where we are today. I'm thankful for Brother Larry and his family. I'm so thankful for them. And they have been a blessing to me, and they've been a blessing to this church. And I don't have favorites, but little Nick is my favorite in this church. And if we had a few more ameners like him, we could finally graduate to the Pentecostal level. So we need to step it up. But I wish we had more black people here. I wish we had Hispanic people. I wish we had Asian people. And here's why. The church needs to look like heaven as much as is possible. And you know what? In heaven, there's going to be people of all tribes, all languages, all tongues, all ethnicities, all colors, all together praising Jesus throughout all of eternity. So if we want to look more like heaven, we need to get some more color around here. I'll tell you this. I don't know if you know this, but the Hispanic population around here has really increased. And I'll have you know that the Hispanic population around here and even neighboring cities are totally unreached by Bible-believing churches. You know why? Language barrier. So, over the last couple of months, I have actually been trying to learn Spanish. And it is not easy. I remember why I almost flunked it in high school. People say America is the hardest language to learn. No, it's not. Spanish is the hardest language to learn. It is so confusing. And I know people will say, well, you know what? If they're going to live here, they need to speak English. Well, you know what? That doesn't help me talk to them about Jesus. So, and I'm all for going on foreign missions. But you know what? The foreign missions have come here. They're here. But there's this language barrier. So I've been working on it. And it's been 4 or 5 Sundays ago, I had to go to Walmart after church to pick up a couple things. And I was in the checkout line. And there was 3 Hispanic men in front of me in line. And I'm thinking, okay, now's my chance. I'm going to practice my Spanish on actual Spanish-speaking people. So I start off with just the regular, greeting kind of stuff. And well, they had some ribeye steaks, and I was wanting to say, "Your steaks are making me hungry." So I pointed to the steak and I rubbed my belly and I said, "Tango hombre." Well, they started laughing. Like laughing really, really hard. And so I just kept my mouth shut, and I get to the truck, and I got this Spanish app on my phone, you know. I pull out my phone, I'm like, all right, I'm going to make sure I didn't say something wrong. Turns out I did. I didn't just say something wrong. I said something really wrong. Like, could not possibly be more wrong. In Spanish, to say I have hunger, it's tengo hambre. Well, I didn't say hombre. I said hombre. You know what hombre means in Spanish? It means man. I didn't say I have hunger. I said I have a man. And so I was like, it's a good thing I didn't say ministros tengo hombre, which would be, I'm a minister who has a man. That would really been bad. So, yeah, there's racism in this world. But contrary to what we're being told, racism is not a majority. It's a minority. I'll tell you what it is. You have ignorant white racists. And as politically incorrect as it is, you have ignorant black racists. And because our media thrives on controversy and drama, guess whose voice speaks the loudest? The voice of the racist. So that's what's going on. By and large, most people don't care about the color of your skin. They care about your character. They care about who you are. Like if you're going and you're going to have a heart procedure, you don't say, well, look, I want to make sure that the surgeon is this skin color. No. You say, I want the one that does the best job. So, with that said, if racism is actually not as a pervasive problem as they're telling us it is, then why are we being told that all of this anarchy is because of racism? I'm having a hard time accepting that. I'm definitely having a hard time accepting that as a white privileged male, I need to apologize for being a white privileged racist. Here's a newsflash. I'm not privileged. I'm not who I am or where I am because I'm white, and neither am I a racist. So apologize for what exactly? You see, they're very sneaky. Satan is always sneaky. You'll have these destructive agendas, and the only way they're going to get them, sneak them in, is if they kind of throw a smoke screen. And the smoke screen is something that appears to be virtuous. And so here's the way it works. They look at you and say, okay, you need to apologize. If you're not going to apologize for being a white privileged racist, then you just don't care that you're a white privileged racist. But then if you say, well, to appease them, I'll just say it. Even though I'm not, I'll just say it. Well, if you apologize for being a white privileged racist, guess what you are? A recovering white privileged racist. So I'm not doing that. A lot of people are. I'm not doing that. I'm not going to apologize, not because of pride, but because I'm not going to lie. I'm not privileged. I'm not a racist, so I'm not apologizing. Because what you're trying to do is you're trying to force me into a corner and get me to say something that's not true in order to spread your agenda, and I'm not doing it. So how about this? If all this really is because of systematic racism, and therefore we need to sound the horn that Black Lives Matter, and they do, if that's really what's going on, then let's show some consistency, and let's say this: all Black Lives Matter. You don't hear that. All Black Lives Matter. Before I read what I'm about to read you, let me say this. The game nowadays is white race. There's only one race. It's the human race. But let's, for the sake of this message, let's play the game and say you got the white race, you got the black race. What is the biggest problem facing the white race? Abortion. All right? Now, with that said, Walt Blackman is a member of the Arizona House of Representatives. He also happens to be a black man. And he wrote a report. And in his report, he explains that black women make up only 14% of the childbearing population, which is to say, black women make up only 14% of the female population. But here's what's staggering. Black women are responsible for 36% of all abortions in the United States. Every year there is over 800,000 abortions. You have aside from Hispanics, you have the smallest percentage of women, black women, who are responsible for almost half of the abortions. So I read that and I couldn't help but to ask myself, why? How is that possible? Because really what you're looking at is this. A black baby is far more likely to be aborted than a white baby is. Why is that? So I did some digging. Did you know that 79% of abortion facilities are located within walking distance of guess what color communities? Anybody want to guess? Black. 79%. Now, I'm not saying 50% of abortion facilities are outside white communities and 50% are outside black communities. I'm saying 79%, which is another way of saying almost all abortion facilities are located right outside black communities. Now, do you think that's a coincidence? Margaret Sanger was the founder of Planned Parenthood. All right? So let's say it like it really is. Margaret Sanger is responsible for professionalizing baby killing. All right? Margaret Sanger also happened to be an outspoken racist. She referred to black people as following: unfit. She referred to black people as garden weeds. Now, when you got a weed in your garden, what do you need to do? If that's not clear enough, she referred to black people as human beings who should have never been born. Now, is that clear enough? If you refer to black people as they should have never been born, you're a racist. Not only was she the founder of professionalizing baby killing, and not only was she a racist, she was also into eugenics. Now, if you don't know what eugenics is, it's where you're trying to control and limit population and even purify the genetic line. So we're talking about like Hitler kind of stuff, Nazi kind of stuff. Okay? So, the founder of Planned Parenthood was a racist who was into eugenics, who felt that black people are weeds in the garden that need to be plucked up, that black people are human beings who should have never been born. Take that, now look at the fact that 80% of Planned Parenthood facilities are outside black communities, and then you try to look at me with a straight face and tell me that's a coincidence? You know what's really disgusting is that Planned Parenthood pretends to be pro-black America. They're not pro-black America. They have targeted black America. They have unleashed a eugenic warfare against black America. Now, Mr. Walt Blackman also explains that in 2011, of the 647,000 black people who died of all causes, he says 360,000 of those deaths were aborted black babies. That's genocide. We're talking about generations upon generations of people who should be here right now, and they're not. But we're supposed to believe that the biggest problem facing the black community is racism. Well, it's not. It's abortion. And what we need to do obviously as churches, but what we need to do as a nation is quit playing this game of the white race and the black race and the Hispanic race, and let's get down to this. The biggest problem facing the human race is abortion. Now, I'm about to wrap it up here in a minute and talk about the part that nobody else wants to talk about. And it would be so easy to twist what I'm going to say or misconstrue what I'm going to say, so I'm going to be as clear as I can. Black Lives Matter as a statement of fact. We agree with that statement, correct? Black lives matter. As a matter of fact, all lives matter. And how we got to a point to where it's politically incorrect to say that, I don't know, but we're there. Black lives matter, white lives matter, all lives matter, because all life has been created by God in the image of God for the glory of God, so all life matters. With that said, all life matters. With that said, Black Lives Matter as an organized political movement is dead wrong. Not only is it dead wrong, it is dangerously wrong. And here's why this is not some mere political thing. And here's why what we're talking about should matter a lot to you if you call yourself a Christian. May not get her name right, but Patrice Cullors is one of the co-founders of the Black Lives Matter organization. And she recently acknowledged that her and her fellow leaders are, quote, trained Marxists. That tells you everything you need to know about Black Lives Matter as a political organization. It's not okay. Let me tell you something about Marxism. When Marxism, every single time in every nation where Marxist ideology has arisen, Marxism inevitably pushed that society into communism. It has to. Marxism ideas and ways of thinking, it has to push that nation into communism, which is why Black Lives leader Chanel Helm, 2017, she releases this demand list that if you want the violence to stop, if you want the protests to stop, then these are the demands that you've got to fulfill. One demand was this: if you are white and you're going to inherit some family property that you intend to sell, don't sell it, give it to a black or brown family, because you, with your white privilege, will recuperate that wealth in some white privilege way. I'm not interpreting what she said, that's what she said. Now, what does that sound like to you? It sounds a whole lot like communism. She also, one of the other demands was that if you're a white woman, then you need to work to get white men fired from your place of employment. That's where they're trying to artificially change the structure of jobs and opportunities. What are we talking about? We're talking about communism. This is Karl Marx in a new dress. That's all this is. And here's why we need to pay close attention to this. And here's why other preachers and other teachers need to stand up and quit being afraid and confront this head on. In every nation, and when I say every nation, I mean every nation. In every nation where Marxism has arisen, Christians die. Christians are murdered. In the 20th century, over 45 million Christians have been murdered as a direct result of Marxism. Read about the gulags in Russia. Read about the Red Terror of Ethiopia. Read about the death camps in North Korea, the killing fields of Cambodia, and how about this one? China, right now, as we speak. All from Mao, all from Marxism. So this is a big deal. And it's not something to take lightly. So Black Lives Matter, as a statement of fact, we agree with it. Racism is bad. Racism is an ignorant evil. All life matters. But at the same time, on the other hand, Black Lives Matter is this political Marxist movement that hides its true face through a smokescreen of a title is wrong. And we need to stand against it. If we let this spread, if we don't stand up and declare the truth, we will lose our freedoms. And all of a sudden, life won't be as valuable as it once was. All of a sudden, everybody becomes disposable. I'll close with this. There's going to be a lot of people that say, look, I don't care about none of that. I just want to fix racism. Okay. Well, if we really want to fix racism, then how come we're not seeing any solutions to racism? Because last time I checked, racism is a what kind of problem? It's a heart problem. Hate to say it, tearing down monuments doesn't fix the heart problem. Political agendas, whether it's Republican or Democratic or Socialist or Communist, that doesn't fix a heart problem. Defunding the police does not take care of a heart problem. But I know what does, and that is the gospel of Jesus Christ. So if you don't know this story right here, Philemon, very wealthy guy. We know he's wealthy because he had a house that was big enough for the church at Colossae to meet in. And we know he was wealthy because he owned at least one slave, and that one slave's name was Onesimus. Well, Onesimus decided he's going to run away. He can be a runaway slave, which was punishable by death in Rome. His plan is, I'm going to run away from Colossae, and I'm going to go to the city of Rome where I can just kind of blend in. Just get lost in the crowds of thousands of people. Well, how's he going to fund his journey to Rome? He's going to steal from his master, Philemon. And that's what he does. He steals Philemon's money and he escapes to Rome. Well, while in Rome, he meets the Apostle Paul. Now, the Apostle Paul had also led Philemon, his master, to saving faith. And guess what? Paul led Onesimus to saving faith in Christ. Paul winds up being in prison, and Onesimus keeps coming around. Paul is discipling Onesimus, training him up. And finally, Onesimus gets to a point where Paul understands he is mature enough in his faith in God that it's time to have the conversation that Onesimus is not going to want to have. He sits Onesimus down and says, look, man, you got to make this right. You got to make it right. You've wronged your master. You're a fugitive from justice as we speak. You stole the man's money. You've got to go back to Philemon and ask for his forgiveness. You've got to do that. So here's what Paul does. He writes a letter, a personal letter to Philemon, which is what you got open right now. He hands that letter to Onesimus and says, here, take this back to your master. Before you say anything to him, you hand him this letter and you tell him that this letter is from the Apostle Paul. So just imagine in your head, Onesimus makes it back to Colossia. He walks to the door of Philemon, knocks on the door. Philemon opens up and knocks. Well, yeah, here you are. You stole my money. You run away. You caused me all kind of trouble. Onesimus hands out the letter. Philemon opens it up. And here's the meat of what he had to say. Verse 8, Philemon, verse 8. Therefore, though I have enough confidence in Christ to order you to do what is proper, for love's sake, I rather appeal to you, since I'm such a person as Paul, an aged and now also a prisoner of Christ Jesus. And he's like, here's my request of you. I appeal to you for my child Onesimus. Child meaning Paul led him to saving faith in Christ, whom I have begotten in my imprisonment, who formerly was useless to you, spiritually speaking, but now he is useful both to you and to me. I've sent him back to you in person, and this is like sending my very heart. I wish to keep him with me so that on your behalf he might minister to me in my imprisonment for the gospel, but without your consent I didn't want to do anything so that your goodness would not be in effect by compulsion, but of your own free will. And then he says this, Philemon, here's something you may want to think about. Maybe he was for this reason separated from you for a while, so that you could have him back forever. No longer as a slave, but more than a slave, a beloved brother. That is what the gospel does. In every society, just like in this society, you got the infamous totem pole. The upper class, the middle class, the lower class. Philemon, he's a master. He's at the top. Onesimus, he's a slave. He's at the very bottom. But you know what the gospel does to that totem pole? He writes to Philemon and he's saying, Philemon, let me remind you of something. You're just as much a sinner as Onesimus is. And let me remind you of something else. You need salvation. You are in need of salvation just as much as Onesimus was. And Philemon, let me remind you of something else. You are going to go to the same heaven that Onesimus is going to. And one more thing, Philemon. The only reason you will ever step foot in heaven is for the same only reason that Onesimus will ever step foot in heaven. Because of what somebody else did for you. So you know what the gospel does? It takes that totem pole and throws it down on the side and it shows us that, you know what? It's level ground. You may be black. You may be white. You may be rich. You may be poor. You may be a somebody. You may be a nobody. It really doesn't matter. You got one way and one way only to go to heaven, and that is to cast aside all trust in your supposed goodness and totally trust in Christ and Christ alone. You see, when that happens, we're forced to see everybody as a mere human being whom Jesus Christ died for. And that is the only solution to racism. With every head bowed and every eye closed, I just want to ask you today, can we come together and pray for our nation? Can we pray that as Christians, we would stand up and say these things that nobody wants to hear, but everybody needs to hear? Father, thank you for the time that you've blessed us with today. And Lord, thank you for Jesus. And Father, I thank you for that reminder I got before church that ultimately this world is not my home. Lord, I'm looking forward to that spiritual kingdom that you're going to be ruling with a rod of iron. Father, I also think about all of our veterans who spilled their blood to stop communism from coming here, to give us our freedom, the freedom to worship, the freedom to evangelize. Father, how dare we just stand aside and not do anything? Father, help us to stand firm and be bold. It's in Christ's name we pray. Amen.